he turns up and he shows up and he does something that we could never think or imagine. And I just encourage you that when, being a part of our church, our love will grow for that as you connect in, connect in with your friends, connect in with the people, and connect in with your passions. Find a place to serve and to and in the places that fulfill you and give you joy, and where your passions can be realized. That is a great thing, and it helps you to fall in love with not only LCF but whatever church that you'll be a part of. So what was my life before I met Jesus or found Jesus? And largely my life was pretty good. I always remember being pretty happy. I had good friendship groups. I mean, largely all my friendship groups were in church. I grew up in church, and that was a really sort of happy experience, growing up in church and all my friendship groups. I was really fortunate that I didn't really need anything, in that I was always provided for. Used to love watching Southend and Southend United. If for those of you who don't know that, they are a football team, now just relegated, but going around the country watching them, or watching that at home, so life for me was pretty good. One of the main things for me though was that I was an angry child. Growing up, often for me to control my anger was a real challenge for me, and just different situations I just couldn't control it. Often for me to cope with my anger, I would usually punch things, and often it was my room that I would go to and just start punching the walls, which was fine because the walls in my room were more made of this sort of softer wood, so I didn't really ever injure myself. But one time I took it out on a wall and it was made of cement. And when I punched that wall, my hand broke. And so there, for me, my memory of really before knowing Jesus, it was often where a life that was good, but often it was my anger that stood out, that I just couldn't control that. And that just leads nicely in a way into a bit of my testimony. And for me, there was two moments where my life really started to turn around, and one of those moments was in my bedroom. Now, always in my bedroom, I would always fall asleep and love to listen to music. Now, because I was a part of church, obviously I was connected to church and to the music that was in church. And this one time I remember falling to sleep and listening to the song "How Great Thou Art." Now, today sometimes that might seem a bit of an old-fashioned song, but I remember listening to this song, and I remember laying awake, and just whilst it was playing, I was like, God, if you are real, show me that you are real. And in utter shock and surprise, in that moment in my room when I asked that question, so vividly, I still remember that it was like God came into my room. And that may sound something that's really difficult to explain, but in that moment, it was like God was in my room. And I remember being filled with such a sense of awe and thankfulness. And I remember just saying, thank you, God. Thank you for answering my prayer. I can't believe that you were in my room. Now, yeah, in my body felt like it was really fuzzy. It felt like it was filled with just... I'm not saying fuzzy love, because I'm not saying that, but it was my body felt really different, but the experience was such a so clear to me that God had heard my prayer and God was in my room. And sometimes experiences, sometimes people may talk a lot about experiences, and in themselves they're great, but they're not the foundation. For me, the foundation is that when you meet with God, that something changes, something happens to you. And for me, the next day, I often, growing up, didn't mind swearing. I love to swear. It was just part of how I talked. And I remember the next day after meeting God in my room, I remember waking up, going to college, and to talk with my friends. And then as soon as one of them swore, I had this sensitivity of, I don't like that. And it was so clear to me that in that moment where I remembered where God had met with me, that instantly my life was started to change. And I could see that my language just stopped. I stopped swearing. And I felt, whereas the day before I met God, swearing, I didn't even realise it, and I enjoyed doing it. The next day, as I went to think about swearing or heard it, I actually just felt like, oh, I can't stand that. And we haven't got the time to probably explore all of the things around how my life started to change, but from that moment, my life did change. And equally with my anger, there were moments where I just realized, wow, God, you need to change me here. And from the moment that I sort of had that prayer and had experiences around certain things, God just healed me of my anger. And even today, people may say to me, like, Steve, you seem such a gentle and calm person. I can't believe that you ever would have struggled with anger. And that is really true. You know, God healed me of my anger. But I also want to be real and say, you know, sometimes in my life, I still suffer with things. I still suffer with challenges that often can really tempt me to react. And through different life circumstances, I've had moments where I have still felt really angry. And occasionally, sometimes I've either maybe shouted out in frustration, maybe shouted too loud at my children. Maybe sometimes I've gone into my room at home and just felt so tempted to punch walls. But you see, the difference is that now I know that I have Jesus. I don't feel guilty about those moments, but I know that Jesus is the one to bring me through those times, and that even though sometimes it brings a lot of courage from me, I can look to him and say, Jesus, I can't do this, so you need to do it for me. So what words of wisdom would I share with my teenage self? Well, like in some ways growing up, I always remember feeling that God had gifted me with a sense of wisdom that had always helped me navigate through different times in my life, you know, whether it was at secondary school and college. I always felt that God had given me that wisdom. And but of course I did make mistakes. But one of the main areas in my life that I did struggle with, that was having boundaries in relationships. You know, God has obviously made us to be in relationship, and God has made us and created us to have an intimate relationship, both emotionally and physically with one other person. And growing up, when you get into relationships, you know, sometimes the desires around that physical attraction can be so difficult. And that's why, you know, I would, you know, the wisdom I would pass on to myself is to say that, you know, when you are in relationships, you know, sometimes if you don't have those boundaries in place, you know, it can affect you for a lifetime. You know, there could be so much hurt involved. There can be so much difficult time when we don't have those boundaries in place. You know, even simple things like today, you know, if you're a young person and you're in a relationship with someone, you know, it may sound a bit like, oh, I don't want to do that, but get someone that you trust involved with that relationship, as in have someone that you can talk to about your boundaries, you know, saying what you're going to be doing, where you're going to be, you know, and just saying to yourself things like, you know, we're not going to go in each other's bedrooms. Maybe it's we're not going to be in the house unless someone else is there. Maybe we're going to say that all we're going to do is hold hands and maybe have a cuddle. You know, I don't think the Bible or Jesus gives us a guide to those things, but I think definitely the wisdom that he would want to I would pass on to myself when I was younger, and the wisdom that I would have passed on to you is to just be really, really careful and to enjoy the relationship that you may be in, but to put the boundaries in place to protect you, to keep you safe, and to keep the other person safe. And that's it.